Building an API platform isn't just about developer speed. It's about self-serve access to infrastructure that helps teams to build, run, and govern APIs consistently. Kong gives you the foundation to do just that. We power the world's top platform engineering teams so they can innovate faster and scale smarter. With self-serve gateway infrastructure, class-leading automation, and out-of-the-box auth and observability tooling, it's a single pane of glass for your API platform team. Cut complexity and expand your roadmap with Kong.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the third episode in our API Discovery series. My name is Erin. I am a product marketing manager here at Kong, and I am joined by Michael Field, who is our technical product marketing manager here at Kong. So before I begin, I just want to remind everyone that the previous 2 episodes of this live stream series are available to watch on demand. So in last week's episode of this series, Michael and I shared how to build reuse into your API program or strategy, specifically with the Konnect developer portal. Now, why would anyone want to build reuse into their API program? At a high level, we've seen organizations that promote API reuse drastically improve their developer productivity and drive cost savings, ultimately improving their time to market and the ROI that they squeeze out of each API developed. Again, if you want to learn more about the Konnect developer portal and how to set up a proper API reuse strategy in your organization, I recommend watching last week's video, which you can access through that QR code, but also you can peruse through Kong's LinkedIn page or our YouTube channel. So this week, we'll be focusing on what great can look like when building a single source of truth for all your internally running APIs and services. By this point in our series, we've established that we meaning Kong, are increasingly noticing organizations out there are facing an API sprawl problem. An API sprawl stems from a lack of centralized API oversight across teams and business units. And because these orgs aren't able to keep an ongoing track of what APIs and services exist in their infrastructure, they inevitably have what we call shadow APIs, which are basically undiscovered and unmanaged APIs that exist in your infrastructure. And while these APIs may have been produced with good intent, if they're left unchecked, they can introduce a range of risks and inefficiencies, which we will now explore. The first and most obvious risk is simply that shadow APIs often bypass standard security reviews and may expose sensitive data or create unnecessary vulnerabilities in the service. Because these APIs are typically unknown and unmanaged, they may not undergo continuous security testing, data compliance controls, or patching, which increases threat vectors such as data breaches or unauthorized access to these APIs. The presence of shadow APIs can also pose serious compliance and operational risks. So if you look in the second column, these APIs were likely not built following organizational standards and introduce inconsistencies in data handling, compliance, and alignment with regulatory requirements. And this lack of control may result in non-compliant practices, which can open up organizations to legal ramifications, such as hefty fines and costly remediation. And on top of these security and compliance risks that exist, your organization also risks major collaboration barriers when assets are unknown to organizations, leading to resource waste and adding maintenance burdens that are more likely to become abandoned over time. So, what gives? What can you do to keep an up-to-date inventory of live services and all their various dimensions? This is where the Konnect Service Catalog can really help. So with the Konnect Service Catalog, you can automatically discover running services and APIs through infrastructural integrations, and you can auto-populate the catalog as services, APIs, and other critical data get discovered and updated in real time. I think it's much better to see in action, so I'll pass it over to Mike, who will show us how auto-discovery and auto-population in real time works within Konnect Service Catalog. Over to you, Mike.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Erin. And everyone's probably seeing the infinity mirror right now, but I'm going to go over to Konnect. You able to see that on your end, Erin?
Yes, perfect.
Cool. So yeah, I'm just going to give a brief overview of Service Catalog and kind of show it in action here. So, kind of starting from the beginning here for folks that are completely unfamiliar with the Service Catalog offering inside of Konnect. The first place you're going to start is with the different integrations. Now, there's a number of different integrations built in here. Some are tied to basically built-in concepts inside of Konnect. So something like the Gateway Manager. These are APIs that are already managed and proxied by a Kong gateway. You can also look at analytics and the same thing on the service mesh. What's really cool with the integrations here is we also support third-party services. And this is a big deal because we believe every kind of service or API that you're managing, you want to have what we call 360 observability. So yes, you want to have the gateway in front, bringing in analytics, protecting of rate limits and authentication, but perhaps you also want to tie in with PagerDuty so you can understand who the on-call engineer is for that particular service and what kind of outstanding requests you have and any kind of downtime experience there. Same thing with Slack. Maybe you want to know what Slack channel and how you can actually contact the engineers managing this. Maybe you want to integrate with something like Traceable or some kind of other third-party observability tooling. So taking a closer look at this is once you set up these different integrations, we're going to pull in is what's known as resources. So resources, if I click on any of these, it's essentially a generic kind of JSON object that is specific to the particular integration. So here we're looking at the GitHub integration, obviously, and this is a particular repository. So I can pull in different information like API specs, maybe what language we're working with inside of that particular repo. Of course, we're going to pull in all the Kong native resources as well. So we can see here are some gateway services that we're managing. Again, just a JSON object specific to that particular integration. We have some different PagerDuty services that we're managing as well. And so what we can actually do is you can create collections of these different resources. And these collections go into what we call services, which is, of course, where the name Service Catalog comes in. So if we look at these services we have, again, services are nothing more than a collection of different resources. And so if we open up one of these, maybe I look at the core platform services here, we can see we brought in some different PagerDuty resources. Again, some gateway services that are actually managed by the Kong gateway, and then an actual GitHub repo where maybe the API specifications themselves live in. And inside the service, there's a lot of different information we can dig into. Of course, I can look at all the individual resources tied to their particular integration. I can see a full historical event log of any changes to the underlying resources tied to the service. So I know exactly what's going on. Again, we can see all these different incidents that have been triggered and resolved through the PagerDuty integration. As I mentioned before, API specs that live inside of the connected repository can be pulled in automatically. So if I jump into that repo real quick, we can see a couple different specs here in the root of the repo. Those can be pulled in automatically, and I can view them directly inside of here. And this is using Kong's brand new spec render. So anytime that there's changes to the underlying spec inside of the repo, that immediately gets pulled into Service Catalog. So you have this one central place, again, pulling in all the specs that are relevant to this particular service. Now, everything I showed here is basically a high-level cataloging, how we discover and we categorize these different services. Again, so we have some kind of inventory here. But to get the actual governance layer, we introduce what we call scorecards here. Now, there's a ton of different scorecards you can create here. If I actually jump over to the scorecards page real quick, you can create as many different scorecards as you would like. Today, you start with these different templates. And these templates are all modifiable based on your organization standards and the criteria you want to have for each of these services to be basically a compliant and inspect service here. So again, this is all modifiable. I can apply it to the services that I would like to down here at the bottom. And so after you create these scorecards, we go back and take a look at our core platform services and see the scorecards that we have here. We can see the overall score that this service is getting, again, for the applied scorecard. So for example, if I jump into the service maturity scorecard, I can look at the incident management scoring, which is tied to the PagerDuty integration. So, checking for like on-call engineers, the number of incidents that have been triggered over the last couple of months, the time to restore, and see which of these are passing and failing. Then tied to the GitHub repo, I can look at different things like the number of PRs that are open and need to be closed. So you can see here, we actually have 3 stale pull requests. And so just kind of show this modification in real time. What I'm going to do now is, again, we have this failing here because we have 3 stale pull requests and the criteria needs to be 2 or fewer. So I'm going to jump over to our repo and I'm actually going to go ahead and merge a couple of these pull requests. So we're going to go ahead and merge this one. Jump back. We're going to go ahead and merge at least one more here. We'll go ahead and add this authentication to our API. Pass the review, merge the pull request. So now that we've merged a couple of these, what we're going to do is we're going to reevaluate the scorecard here. So automatically, these scorecards reevaluate every 15 minutes. But if you want to force a quick refresh, basically just go here to edit. I'm going to save it again. And we'll see that it's basically reevaluating all the services that the scorecard is applied to. And so while it's running in the background, we'll take a look at the new updated score here in just a moment. Let's take a look at our other scorecard as well, which is our service documentation scorecard. And so the specs we were pulling in from the GitHub repo earlier, it sees them here. Once at least one or more API specs existing on the service, which does pass it. But we can also apply different linting rules based on these rule sets. So we have, just the Open API specification recommended, also the OWASP top 10, as well as the Open API spec documentation linting rules. I can go here and actually look at some more detailed rules. So I can look at each of the specs individually and see what rules are actually failing. And so again, obviously you could use this criteria to go back then to the GitHub repository where these specs actually live, make sure the engineers or teams responsible for these specs become in compliance and can make those changes. And then again, the scorecard will reevaluate every 15 minutes. So when something comes in or out of spec, the team or the platform team looking at these services will know immediately. So now let's go back and check and see if this other scorecard is updated. And we can see that it has. Originally, it was at a 70% overall score, and now it's jumped up to 80% because we've merged those two pull requests. We now are in spec for this particular criteria around the stale pull requests. So just a super speedy overview here, but hopefully this gives you an idea of how flexible the service catalog object model is to set up your services, however applies best to your organization, and then apply governance through the scorecards that we see here. And with that, Aaron, I will pass it back over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike, for that great demo. And thank you all for tuning in. So as you all can see, the service catalog in Konnect is great at, first of all, discovering and populating. And then kind of Mike showed us the next step, which is the governance layer, where you can take all of that great contextual information and start to govern your services and APIs properly. So this concludes our API Discovery Livestream series. But we hope that you'll join us next week for a special episode where we will be exploring Kong's new developer tool for building open API specs with AI. So with this new tool, you can generate high-quality specs in seconds. You can preview them in a clean UI, and you can share them instantly with teammates without having to log in anywhere. So you can actually test this today if you're curious at create, CREATE-API.dev. And make sure to tune in next week so you can learn more about how to fit that into your API workflow. But with that, thank you, everyone. And thanks, Mike. And yeah, we'll see you all next week.
Thanks, everybody.